Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us in this webinar on ensuring carbon credits integrity. I'd like to extend a warm welcome for all of our online audience, as well as our outstanding panel here with me in ACT Amsterdam offices. The impressive turnout, we have a lot of people tuning in today, underscores the deep interest and commitment to understanding and upholding integrity in the carbon markets. So it's quite a critical time to discuss the topic. The voluntary carbon markets has experienced rapid growth in the recent years, but in 2023 has brought significant challenges. There have been criticism and concerns regarding the impact and the additionality of carbon credits in general, raised especially by certain projects that have been exposed for bad practices. Increased scrutiny has triggered calls for better quality control and more consistent regulations. Stakeholders in the VCM have developed various criteria for what constitutes high integrity, such as the core carbon principles of the Integrity Council for Voluntary Carbon Markets, the ICVCM, and Carbon Credits Quality Initiative Scoring Tool. Despite these efforts, a uniform definition of what is a high integrity carbon credit remains elusive, making it challenging for companies to ensure their investments are channeled to high integrity credits and bring about real impact and support climate action. These challenges altogether have had a tangible impact on the buyer's confidence in the VCM and prompted some companies to disengage completely from the market. So today we would like to talk about these challenges and explore a way to reinstate and restore the trust in the VCM. Our goal is really to ensure that companies can achieve real impact and can understand and know how to overcome the challenges of identifying high integrity. So thank you all here for being a part of this conversation. I'm very excited. I'm Benedetta. I'm a carbon strategist here at ACT. I'll be moderating, and I'll be also receiving your questions here on the iPad for the last part of the session, so please do type them in. And I'll be moderating an astounding panel here with me, made up by Victor, who is a carbon credit sourcer at ACT Group. He oversees sourcing and business development, fostering connections between carbon developers and major buyers. Ricardo is leading the technical project design and certification process at ACT, ensuring that every project is held to industry-leading standards. And Kirti is joining us from BeZero. She is a Senior Director of Ratings and Innovation with expertise in climate change impacts on coastal ecosystems. So I'd like to start exactly from the challenges that I was just mentioning. And so to do so, I'd like to ask Victor, who represents probably the best part here for the buyer side, as he talks daily with the buyers about these challenges. And so I'd like to ask you, Victor, what kind of trends do you see from buyers, and how do you ensure high integrity when sourcing carbon credits? What are the challenges in ensuring procurement and sale of only high integrity credits?
Thanks for the introduction, Benedetta, and thanks for the question. So one trend that we're seeing right now on the carbon markets, on the voluntary carbon markets, is the focus towards removal type credits. So projects which will actively capture carbon CO2 from the atmosphere. This can come through mainly ARR projects, which is in high demand at the moment. These projects are appealing because they deliver both a social impact when they're involving communities, but also strong environmental benefits. And this is why companies are attracted to these, because you can get the best of both worlds. But despite that, there's still a pushback regarding the pricing of these credits. Budget is still something that companies are looking at very closely, and that sometimes work against their own commitments towards these carbon pledges that they're making. In addition to ARR projects, we're also seeing a lot of new interest towards these developing technologies, such as biochar, direct air capture, and bioenergy with carbon capture and storage. These technologies are expensive to develop, so they need a lot of investment from the carbon markets, and that's also a hurdle because companies are not at the stage yet where they're able to pay hundreds of dollars per ton. So one way that we found to help with this and to to support the adoption of these new technologies is to take a portfolio approach towards your purchases. This way you can still manage to support and sponsor these technologies while still maintaining a slightly lower average cost on your carbon that you're purchasing. We work with project developers very closely to ensure carbon quality. So it's not only just looking at the carbon credit, but it's looking at the entire life cycle of the project, from project design all the way to implementation, MRV, and the entire life cycle management of the project. So of course, projects which are deemed high quality and high integrity have more MRV being put in place, so monitoring, verification, and reporting. Sorry, I mixed up the verification and reporting. And of course, these practices incur higher costs because you need to employ more people to work on these things, and you need to make sure that everything is managed properly, so more costs being associated. Identifying these projects is also a challenge because, of course, you need to scratch past the surface, and that's why we're partnering with companies like BeZero to help us, take care of some of this due diligence. But yeah, it's still a challenge that we're seeing, definitely. We still, of course, put forward projects that prioritize carbon permanence, so such as ARR project, like Ricardo is going to talk about more in a bit. And these projects require, long-term management to make sure that the efforts that they're putting in place stay for long term. And that's where ECT comes in. We help identify those projects, and we help find projects that fit the goals of our client and that fit their vision.
Thanks, Victor. Just one clarification point right at the start, right? We use a bit interchangeably high quality and high integrity, but I feel that there's a little bit more to it. How do you think it's perceived, and how do you see the small difference between high quality and high integrity?
So high quality is often something that we see around what does the project bring to the ecosystem, to the nature. So that's going to be community involvement, that's going to be biodiversity conservation efforts, all of these co-benefits around the credits. While when you talk about high integrity, it's more about how the project was set up, how accurate the baseline was, how transparent the project developer is in their reporting and everything. And that's kind of the distinction between the two terms.
Thanks, Victor. And indeed, this part, I think, of integrity that you were just mentioning, you mentioned permanence, you mentioned technologies, and you mentioned data. These are the parts that are a bit the more burdensome and harder to understand. And so now my question is a bit to Kirti, which as BeZero rating system is there to also enhance this transparency and also the trust in the voluntary carbon market. How do you handle the potential complexities involved in rating a wide range of projects?
So at BeZero, we've built sector-specific methodologies to rate projects, but we also have an overarching master methodology that looks and explains the 3 risk factors that we fundamentally look at all across the market. There are additionality, permanence, and carbon accounting. What our sector-specific methodologies do is that they explain the inputs for each of those 3 factors that guide us. So for instance, for additionality, for an ARR project, you might look at the common practice of plantation establishment over time, whereas for something like a renewable energy project, you might look at the feed-in tariff that it uses. But ultimately, both of those inputs will have an impact on how we view additionality. When we bring our subsector methodologies together, it allows for a fungible metric by which users can compare a rating from like one activity type to another activity type anywhere in the market.
Thanks, Kirti. That's very interesting to hear how you're adopting overarching standards, but also methodology-specific ones. How do buyers use ratings to manage project risks that you just mentioned, and what other tools for screening risks does BeZero offer?
Buyers can use our tools in a number of different ways. So they can use the rating to diagnose where risk lies. So for instance, they can understand why the permanence risk of a project might be high or low and what drivers feed into our assessment of that. But we also have other tools that people can use. So very early stage for ex-ante projects, we also do a project execution assessment so they can look at the likelihood or the risks associated with this project becoming operational at all. We can look at delivery risk, and we've built databases all across the market that help feed into these.
Thank you. It's impressive, the range of tools and service offering that BeZero is building. And I'll be very curious to see the uptake and how this actually does ensure higher integrity and higher trust in the voluntary carbon market. It is, however, a very complex overall system to try to abide by all those standards and try to ensure that all those risks have the best practices when implementing. And so talking about implementation, my next question is for Ricardo. And I would like to know a little bit about these best practices. What are they, or which ones are they for developing high integrity carbon projects? And what can developers do to boost the rating of their projects?
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Benedetta. Well, in general, when we're talking about carbon projects in general, I think the key aspects are indeed additionality. Of course, there are many, many requirements, but additionality and permanence beyond the crediting period are the key factors that either can greatly affect the quality of a project. So additionality, be sure that the project activity would not occur otherwise without the funding of the carbon, and permanence, that the benefits last over time. So when we talk about the forestry carbon, ARR projects, which are revegetation or tree planting or natural regeneration, and when we talk about also RED projects, which is protecting forests from degradation, we see that the integrity is, and the good practices actually go way beyond that. So for example, for ARR projects, we are looking for the biodiversity benefits that we generate. So are we protecting the environment? Are we using native or non-native, or of course invasive species are not allowed for most standards. So these are the key questions. How are communities engaged in the mid to long term? Local stakeholders, local communities are the key factors of success of projects. Also, looking at the baseline carbon stocks. Did we measure, was there any carbon stock in there? Many projects, some projects may just ignore that, which is absolutely not a good practice. And also, of course, thinking of the permanence. What other financial incentives or cultural incentives are there, especially for the local communities, that this project continues? For the RED projects, the avoided deforestation projects, of course, there are many important things to look at, but the key components are indeed choosing the correct reference areas and deforestation maps. So you cannot cherry pick which deforestation map you're going to use to give you the result that you want. So now the methodologies are much more strict on that as well. And of course, being very clear on land tenure, community engagement, and the community impact. Because usually RED projects, many of them are in community lands, indigenous lands. So this relationship has to be very, very well managed, very well transparent, and with transparent benefit sharing. Overall, these are more or less the key components. Also, for the quality and ratings, of course, I leave that to my colleague.
Thanks, Ricardo. It sounds like there are really a lot of aspects and risks that a project developer must manage and must try and make it better to ensure that the best practices are in place. Among all of these that Ricardo mentioned, additionality, permanence, community engagement, cherry picking of maps, Kirti, I'd like to hear a bit, as you rate a lot of these projects, which ones are the most common challenges for project developers when it comes to getting their projects rated?
I'd say the common challenge actually comes even before the rating. It's actually being eligible for the rating. So BeZero's eligibility criteria are centered around transparency, which means that we really want the fundamental data that underlies a project's credit issuance, like its baseline emissions, its project emissions, essentially how it calculates everything from start to finish, to be available. And we put this into a structured format. So for us, it's about actually enabling project developers to have standardized templates to be able to provision this data and understand it themselves as well, even before we start a rating. That would be like one of our biggest challenges.
Data, 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 always data, right? It's great to hear that BeZero is actually doing even capacity building almost, right, for project developers. So it's really working across the board on the VCM to try and build capacity and the standards and transparency. A little bit more, let's get a little bit more into tangible aspects of project development. So maybe Ricardo, one more question on a specific case study, if you could share from one of your nature-based projects. What were the key factors in its success, and how did it manage to secure long-term carbon removal and community benefits?
Fantastic. So I'm going to talk about the Amazonia Nativa project that we are developing in Colombia. So the idea was to do this project, and actually, by the way, the project is being rated ex ante by BeZero right now. So thank you for all the templates of data. So it's really good that you guys are really providing a to-do list. I really appreciate that. So how to apply everything that we said here on the ground. So what we do in this ARR project, we only use native species for the species planted. So only 8% of, sorry, pardon my English, 8, not 80, 8% of the reforestation projects, carbon projects in Colombia use exclusively native species. With that in mind, we also conserve forest remnants. So the region of the project, there are native tropical forest remnants there. So for each 1.5 hectare that we plant, we conserve another hectare of existing forest. This conservation does not generate any carbon credits for the project. We don't claim any credits from it. It's just indeed for the biodiversity benefit, and this goes way beyond the standard requirements. So we need, of course, the carbon removal, which also the market is looking for. But the good thing also about working with forestry projects is that forests are more than carbon, right? So you can really explore and benefit from the biodiversity benefits, the soil protection benefits. And getting a little bit more into that, thinking of permanence, we bring more products than just the carbon. So we also have acai production. As a Brazilian, I love acai, so I'm suspicious to talk about that. And also we have timber production. But our timber harvesting is low impact logging with selective logging. So the forest cover is always maintained throughout the crediting period. So we always remove trees little by little, plant more trees. And once the project period ends, of course, we're gonna have a forest there, and farmers could either continue this selective logging or work as a silvopastoral areas, because the tree is going to be large enough so that cattle could be there, and then continue the activity with common practice, not common practice, but things that farmers are more familiar in the region, like pasture land, silvopastures, and this kind of stuff. So that's one thing. And finally, on the data part, we are working a lot on trying, when in doubt, we try to be conservative as much as possible. So to estimate tree growth, to estimate carbon stock of trees, we really look in the literature. If there's a range of values, we use the lower, the lower range of values, so we can be conservative when possible on the tree growth. So applying that on the field, applying that in a real situation, is more like that. Of course, last thing, we also work with the communities. All the seedlings that we buy come from local community nurseries. We don't own the nurseries. It's local people that own the nurseries. They sell to other projects, to other activities, but they sell to us as well. So we also provide technical support for them so they can sell. And actually, this relates to having strong partners in the ground. We have very, very good partners on the ground there, local institutions that help us, they are the ones managing directly the local people. They are the ones managing directly the planting. So, for example, the Campo Capital institution help us a lot on that. So they are our partners on that. So that's a very important point as well.
Thank you, Ricardo. Really a lot to hear about this, a lot to take in also around this Amazonia Nativa, which we're very much looking forward to have rated and see the outcome of. But also what I really can take away from this is, like, beyond that very conservative 1 ton of carbon that you can sell from a project, there's so much more to it, right? And that's what really brings it up. It's not only being very conservative in ensuring that the number is real and happening, but also that there are so many co-benefits, from the community engagement, to the pasture, to the acai, to the biodiversity, to the conservation. It's really great to hear. And I think it's really hard for buyers to read through that whole plethora of additional values that a carbon credit has. And that's how I think enablers like BeZero can play a role with the ratings and not only just baselining the integrity, right? However, it's a lot of work. We mentioned the data, but also telling the story around it and distinguishing from other projects is really hard. So my question is a little bit to Kirti. you are a transparent enabler as BeZero, and you provide an extremely valuable service to the market. But who should bear the cost that we just mentioned on all of the data and of the overall rating of this service, and how you ensure independence when doing that?
Yeah, I think I might flip the question on its head and think about what the person really wants out of the rating. And then that answers the question of like who the client is and who bears the cost. So, you know, are you trying to use the rating to identify risks very early stage and develop a project, you know, with high standards and safeguard against risks? Are you trying to use the rating as an insurance provider? You know, it really depends on who bears the cost, ultimately depending on what they want. So we see our clients really all across the value chain of the market. I think the question on maintaining independence is almost more interesting, and there's many ways in which we do that, right? So at BeZero, there's no preferred access or early access to a rating. Everyone in the market finds out about the rating at the very same time. Also, we're the only ratings agency with all of our ex-post ratings available in the public domain. So we think that it's a public service, and at the very least, users should be able to identify the top line of credit quality assessments from us. So we provide them. The other thing that we do is also we have quite a nice separation of a Chinese wall between our analytics and our commercial team, and also our payment structure means that the rating is not influenced by the payment. Finally, I think our distribution of ratings also speaks a little bit to independence in itself, where you know it's not a normal distribution. We actually see this quite a large tail of lower ratings, and you know, should there have been a conflict of interest, it might come out in the distribution too. It's not really in our interest to be biased towards ratings because that affects our business model. No one would trust the rating in itself.
Very interesting, indeed, for sure. Nobody is in the interest of having a skewed rating. If not, it wouldn't work as a service, I guess. But it's interesting. What I find most interesting is that there are different reasons why one may get a rating, and therefore your clients may actually be diverse. We are rating Amazonia Nativa, so Ricardo is your client today, but you often also may interact with other clients that might be the buyers or might be the financing side of the project.
If I may interject.
I was about to get to you. I wanted to hear from you, Victor, indeed.
So we do see more and more companies being aware of these ratings, and actually when going to the market to purchase some projects, looking at the rating and requiring a project to be rated. So it goes as far as sometimes if a company has identified a project that they like, they can go as far as pay for the rating themselves. So companies are aware of these ratings, and we do see it as a driving force for demand.
Fantastic. And maybe if I can stay with you, Victor, I had one more question, which is still a little bit around the why of like why would one get it rated, but especially what, like a little bit more still taking one step back, why is it important for organizations to understand the quality of the carbon credits they're sourcing, and then why would they get it rated?
Yeah. I mean, we've seen the potential consequences of acquiring low quality credits through different reports, but in all seriousness, understanding the carbon credits that you purchase is crucial. It's critical because high quality credits can guarantee a measurable and a climate benefit that you're participating in. Low quality credits may look appealing because often the price is lower, but at the end of the day, you might not know what you're investing into. So we definitely put a lot of importance, or we try our best to communicate to our clients the quality behind the credit that we're presenting them. And at the end of the day, sourcing carbon credit for your company is the same as sourcing any other material for your company. If you want to source low quality, well, it will show. If you want to source high quality, great. Sourcing low quality can have its challenges because it can not only, undermine the commitment that you've made, your climate goals that you've made, but it can also undermine your entire message towards your potential clients. So it is very important to understand what you're buying so that you can communicate on it better and translate it better to your client base. And we're here to help understanding what credits you're buying, of course.
Yeah, of course, and it's really a jungle out there, right, in terms of not only the quality, but also the differences in methodologies, or rather sort of technologies. And Kirti, you were talking also about the distribution of the ratings. And so I wonder, with these newer methodologies that are given like the space in the market, how are you trying to address the integrity questions? And have we seen changes in the rating distributions?
I think it's too early to see those changes. You know, these methodologies are coming out to the market, going through consultation now. We're yet to see, you know, the first credits be issued from the consolidated avoided deforestation methodology, for instance. So I think there's still like this period of change. But I also think that, you know, new methodologies are getting great. We're definitely seeing more safeguards come through these methodologies, but ultimately the quality will depend on how the project implements the methodology, because they still come with choices that projects and developers can make. And also the context of what a project operates in. So we still see a use case for ratings.
Sorry, can you speak more about the use case for ratings? What do you mean?
Yes, I think that having better methodologies is great. It's exactly what the market needs, but it's almost like the first step towards improved quality. Ultimately, we see that, you know, methodologies offer projects a series of choices they can make, and for instance, how they would set their baseline, how they might consider the extent of the project boundary, and like what emissions they will include as deductions for their project emissions. And all of those choices will impact credit quality. And that's where the ratings assessment would come in.
And so talking about all of these choices, Ricardo, if you were given a choice and you have to bring a project from A to AAA, what would you, especially in your area, of course, of nature-based solutions, what would you go after first?
Well, for the ratings is more on the BeZero, but how then I would improve a project rating on that. I think improving existing projects is a challenge. It's possible. Of course, you can work on the practice of the local communities. You can reassess the baselines. You can recalculate the carbon stocks, and this will change all the projections, all the ex-ante estimates of the project. Just to name a few positions that you could do, it's definitely possible, you know, but it's quite a challenge to restructure that. I think it's a very important project design, you know. It's like when you, I work a lot of trees, you know, once you plant a tree in the place, it's difficult to move it. So it's the same thing for this type of projects, you know, once it's established, you could improve it, you could usually seek support to improve the methodologies, the data. I think if we compare the literature on the data available to estimate, to map, to monitor, from 10 years ago to today, it's another world. So this kind of reviews is possible. But really a good project design, a good feasibility study, using the technology available, it's way, way better investment as well than, well, it's important to fix the existing projects, but I think it's a steeper curve, you know, but it's possible for sure.
Thanks, Ricardo. Maybe I'll ask you a little bit of a very similar question, right? What are the most significant trends you see for projects that produce high integrity credits, basically?
Yeah, I mean, transparency, additionality, and co-benefits. Having, you know, confirmed SDGs and audited SDGs is a huge step, a huge improvement on any project. Meeting any additional labels like the CCP that you were talking about earlier, or on Vera with the CCB. Those are all things that will, you know, they're all signals of high quality in a project, because you're going through these additional auditing processes to, yeah, show that you're transparent, to show that you're doing the best practices possible. And at the end of the day, this will only inspire more confidence in the buyer that's looking at your project and that's evaluating this one versus another that's, you know, hasn't been audited as much, that hasn't received all those SDG certifications. So yeah, I think that, you know, transparency is a huge thing.
And you've just mentioned CCP labels and standards in general as an enhancer of project quality. So maybe one question to Kirti around CCPs. Do you see any how do actually credit integrity assessments such as ICVCM, CCP labels, and ratings converge, and how do you see them interplay?
Yeah, I think there is space for both, and they actually work together. We find that like the CCP labels are like the first step that help you maybe filter out, but ultimately they're like a binary assessment where the project would get a label or not, but there's, in our view, a whole spectrum of quality, even if you get the label versus like not getting the label, and that's where ratings really helps you make kind of a more informed, deeper due diligent assessment.
So using them essentially as a decision tree almost, label, no label, and then all the co-benefits, the extra additional value, the conservativeness of the calculations. That's where ratings really try and help buyers in understanding the quality of the credit, right? Mm-hmm. Fantastic. I think I'll start moving on to questions from our audience that have been popping into the chat. So, how do you assess the long-term viability and impact of a climate project in regions prone to environmental instability? I think this one is a good one for you, probably, Kirti.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So as part of our ex-ante process, one of the things that we actually look at is project execution risk. This is the risk that a project may not become operational, and we look at a lot of different things for this. So we look at the environment that it operates in, so for instance, the natural risk or the anthropogenic risk that it might be faced with, but also just the technical team that are responsible for implementing the project, their background and their expertise in being able to handle the complexities that underlie every project in the market. So that's one way that we do it. In the ex-post world, what we're looking at is really permanence in this case. So to do that, we've built up a really fantastic geospatial team for all of our nature-based projects. We've brought some great products to the market that some of our friends in the insurance space are also using. So we're looking at near real-time monitoring of extreme weather, fires, forest loss and degradation, and all of those really help you make an assessment of how this project is doing today, what it means for the risks that the credits are like already issued and available in the market. Are there reversal events? Are there loss events, etc.
Maybe I can add on to that. Last week or 2 weeks ago, we were looking at a certain project that was on BeZero's rating watch, which is basically the project has received a grade but is currently being reevaluated. And we wanted to chat with them, okay, why is this on rating watch, to understand it better. So we held a meeting with some of your coworkers, and they showed us, okay, here's the satellite imagery. We see that, there might have been some leakage risks because some areas around the project zone might have been targeted by illegal logging and stuff like that. So yeah, we also rely on BeZero and our partners for this because they have the means in place to monitor these things. That's it's difficult for an end buyer to keep track of. And again, it highlights the importance of such platforms to make sure that the longevity of the project is also preserved.
Of course, geospatial tools, not everybody has them on their smartphone and consults them before buying a carbon credit. I know that in these terms, Ricardo, also as a project developer, there is a feasibility assessment that you sometimes do ex ante to understand around the areas, and maybe you can talk a little bit more about it.
Perfect. I think this relates to transparency and relates also to the data. The remote sensing technology now it's more refined and more available, and in many projects of especially on forest-based projects or mangrove-based projects, you can really see results from space, basically. So it's going to be, transparency is going to be there, even if the project developer or somebody tries to hide it, your team could check it, regardless. So with that in mind, we use that in our advantage. So we use local maps, Sentinel data with resolution to check before we do a project, which areas are eligible for carbon project development, which areas are eligible for forestry activities because of slope or other stuff. Also, we develop local algorithms to differentiate vegetation, so we can do baseline monitoring with different strata. So this type of activity on the geospatial and the remote sensing sector has been increasingly a lot recently. For more refined monitoring, once the project is issued, there are many organizations using the drone monitoring. So Basically, instead of going there, you measure some trees, you do that, but then you also can use a drone to scan the whole forest. Yeah. So it's not more monitoring, you're doing kind of a census of forests. So this type of activity, the feasibility studies we provide here in ACT, and it's really like a quick assessment of potential of the projects. So like I said, already in the design, we start with the correct measures for that. So that's really the way for us.
Thanks, Ricardo. That's very interesting to see also how technology is helping us to monitor and understand better, right? Like drones and geospatial tools, of course, will play a key role also in the future. I have a question here, which I believe it's for Kirti. Are you guys seeing an increase in demand for ratings for credits? And if so, does this also lead to a higher price for higher rated credits? Is there a clear correlation? I think this is also Victor, but maybe I'll start from Kirti.
Yeah, I'm happy to go first. Yeah, I think, as Victor also mentioned earlier, we are seeing like a lot of companies ask for a rating to inform their credit choice decision. But also earlier this year, we did put out some work where we're starting to see the first correlations come through between price and ratings. And one of the headline takeaways from that I find really interesting is that for every ratings bucket, so think about moving from a single A to a double A, there's like a 25% increase or uplift in the credit price. So I think this is really important because back when BeZero started, there was not a correlation between credit quality and price, and actually buyer decisions were informed by other attributes, including co-benefits, which might be important as well for a whole bunch of other reasons that we talked about. But ultimately, like the thing that's being traded as a carbon credit, and there was no quality associated with that pricing decision. So we're really excited to see that come through.
And from my side, I mean, you've always seen projects that are priced more expensive or less expensive than others. And at the end of the day, each project has its unique costs. The more MRV you put in place, the more cost you will have. And of course, the more MRV you have, hopefully, the better rate you will have on BeZero as well, right? So yeah, to me, it's a bit a chicken and the egg. Which one comes first? Is it the high quality that justifies the high price, or is it the high price and therefore more practices that justify the high credit rating? Yeah.
And did you see more demand for ratings from buyers?
Yeah, so rating agencies, I mean, I don't know how long BeZero has been operational for, but I feel like on the buyer's perspective, it's really came to light for them in mid-2023, early 2023, around the time where some scrutinies were being put around certain projects, and as a market reaction, we did see an increase in interest around these rating agencies and around rated projects. Yeah.
That's great to hear. And I have another question still on price, so we'll keep the topic going. We've been talking about, you just mentioned, right, MRV is often linked and correlated with higher price because there's more transparency and all, but I was wondering a little bit more what factors drive the pricing of carbon credits more so in terms of the risk assessment. Is it more additionality? Is it more permanence? What are the key ones that drive most the price, and how do buyers assess whether they're getting a fair value for their investment?
That's a tough one. Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, there's so many variables that come into play when pricing a carbon credit. The geographical location, the technology type. Different developers also have different means to do this. A lot of them use digital methods to monitor their project, but a lot of them also utilize local communities to make sure that they can keep track of everything. So I do think that although when you're looking at removals, permanence is one of the most crucial points, and that's also why we're seeing a rise in those new technologies like biochar, DAC, and bioenergy with carbon capture and storage, because these are technologies where, that the carbon is being stored, thanks to this scientific research, for how long it's being stored, versus a forest where, you can have climate disasters happen and you don't know how long it's going to be there for. So both technologies have their place in the market. It's just we need to find a way to make them all work together.
Maybe Ricardo, following up on this question, which ones of these aspects would you prioritize in your project? Is it more the safeguards towards climate disaster? Is it more the monitoring and reporting, if you were to prioritize any of these?
Fantastic, yeah. I think it's really project specific. There's no silver bullet, but indeed, what Victor said is correct. Permanence is a key issue. Also, permanence is one of the key parameters under BeZero. So, yeah, if you are working on certain types of projects, the removal or the reduction is permanent. For others, it needs to be sustained. For example, in a forestry project, the forest has to be there for the removal to exist. So this can also be more delicate. Of course, the forestry has more co-benefits, but you need to have very, very strong safeguards to maintain this for a while. So indeed, especially depending on the area that we work, fires or lack of land tenure can be a severe problem in this project. So overall, indeed, there is a key aspect of taking care, like of really reducing the risk of these projects regarding, not only having fire breaks to prevent fire, but also, especially in the dry season, having fire watches on that. And then again, I'm being repetitive on that, but it's very important, working with the local communities. So we find out a lot that no more than fighting the fire, sometimes you talk with the people around it, and if it's a common practice in the region, you just say, okay, you need to use it to manage your pasture land, and you've been doing that for 50 years. Let us know when you do it, so we can protect our forests. So it's not like eradicate the danger, but really negotiate with the local communities, which in the end, in the mid-long term, are they responsible as that. And also if they planted, they helped you plant the forest, they also sell the seedlings for the nursery, they want that forest to stand there. Yeah. So I think that's one of the most powerful message for permanence in the long term.
Bottom line a bit is prioritize every aspect of it to ensure that there's permanence and high quality and high integrity, right? And
of course.
I guess that's very interesting.
Yeah.
I have one more question for you coming from our audience, Ricardo. How is partial logging compatible with a carbon removal project, and how are biodiversity benefits maintained if cattle is allowed after the project?
Perfect. I think that's a very, very good question on that. So I'll go first for the logging. Partial logging, first of all, you maintain the forest cover. Second of all, you maintain a diversity of structure in the forest that allows for habitat, for different fauna, and also for different plants. So you don't have, when you do partial logging, this different in structure, like you don't have like that forest that is everybody the same age, which is very homogeneous. With the logging, you create small gaps that generates different environments, and you increase biodiversity of natural generation and fauna on that. So that's the first aspect. Of course, every tree that you remove, the carbon is not considered for the project. We don't claim the carbon of that tree. And of course, depending on how many trees you remove on the logging, you have to calculate the carbon completely different, which we call the long-term average. But also this depends on which type of logging you're doing. For the cattle, it's very interesting to see that the silvopastorals, when you have a forest structure on the top where the cattle can go underneath, which is one of the options that a farmer could have in the long term, they're actually much more permeable. So when I say permeable, I mean local animals of the native community will move around these ecosystems much more and nest on it much more than if it was just a pasture land, which could be an alternative land use if there was no permanence on this project. Not only that, the shaded environment of a silvopastoral also favors different types of plants, depending on the intensity of grazing. And in the end of the day, the pasture, actually the cows are happier in the shade. Like here we are in a cold place, but if you are in the tropics, trust me, you want to be on the shade. So this is one of the options after the crediting period that we give to the farmers. But of course, this is flexible, and I think in 30 years is adaptive management throughout the 30 years to find best practice. Hopefully, they will prefer to continue with pure forestry, which we would be happy to continue with them.
Interesting. Thank you very much. One more question. Do you see a geographic mismatch between where projects are developed and where companies are seeking to invest? I think this is a good question for Victor.
I can answer some of that. So to my understanding, one of the most crucial points of the voluntary carbon market and why it was set in place was to drive financing towards developing countries, which most of the time are countries that also feel firsthand the effects of climate change and the effects of a warming world. So definitely, I would say we need to prioritize projects in developing countries. A lot of corporates, a lot of companies that look at carbon credits, of course, also like to invest locally and make sure that their communities around them are also remunerated for their processes, for their actions. So we see a lot of companies taking, again, a portfolio approach, sourcing from different continents, different countries, just to make sure that, yes, they can invest in those developing countries, but also invest locally. I think that's a good idea. I think that's a good practice. But let's also keep in mind that, yeah, we need to invest towards developing countries. And when you're looking at the Paris Agreement and all these things set in place, it's also there to make sure that these developing countries can benefit from carbon projects, from carbon programs, and yeah, can better fight climate change locally.
Absolutely. Thank you. And carbon credits is a mechanism indeed to channel more financing to developing countries into the global south. So one more question. How important is credit rating in appealing to corporate off-takers? And what steps can developers take to boost their projects' market attractiveness through better ratings? I feel we've a bit covered this question already, but maybe we can just bring about the key aspects. Maybe I think it's a question that can span whole three of you.
I'll just say one thing. Yes, a credit rating can help, but we also see a lot of independent projects which are not rated, especially on the technological space. You see a lot of them securing offtakes with buyers, and at the end of the day, it boils down to the same thing, transparency, and being able to demonstrate that, yes, your project is valid, and you're actually achieving what you're claiming you are.
Yeah, I think maybe a parallel that we can do is like, for example, I don't know, in the job market 50 years ago, like our parents or grandparents, like, oh, if you went to a university, yeah, you were great and you had a job. Nowadays, you know, it's oh, you went to university, but did you do an MBA? Did you do a master's? Where did you? And I see that their ratings, they're very good on that. So, for example, following the standards, it seems now it's become okay. Well, you're not doing more than you should do. It's the minimum. And the ratings is really like, okay, but you pass these requirements. So how good are you?
Yeah.
You know, so I think that's the value that brings.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, you know, Victor and Ricardo summarized it really well, but the thing that the rating offers that's like maybe different is really like this fungible comparison point, right? Like you're now able to compare an ARR project with an avoided deforestation project with any other project in the market, but also you're able to compare projects across lots of different standards bodies. So we've rated like projects from across more than 15 standards bodies, and this is what we're seeing as well, right? Like independent measures and new labels are being set up, but all of these are new terms and users still need like a single metric to be able to compare all of these things with. Like that's what it offers.
Just to add on to that, the decision-making process when purchasing carbon credit can be very lengthy. And of course, we don't expect people to sit down and read 50 pages documents about every single project. So tools like BeZero indeed help translate and convey this message much easier throughout the decision-making chain. And yeah, it allows for, hopefully, more educated purchasing decisions.
Yeah, clearly. Thanks. An interesting question for project developers. So I think, Ricardo, you'd be in a good place to answer this one. How do shifts in demand and carbon credit pricing affect the financial stability and revenue projections of project developers?
Fantastic. That's a very good one. That's why we also look for other sources of income beyond carbon. Because yes, it affects, of course, when you do a verification and you generate the carbon credits, you know, you don't need to sell at that moment, right? You could wait for the market to move, but as a project development perspective, it's very important, in my opinion, to have a different source of income, especially if it's community land, and also thinking of the local stakeholders, so that you can have different pillars to sustain the project as well. So if something happens and the carbon market is not paying much, that's for the next 3 years for that project, you have the other sources of income for the project. Or, for example, if one of the, if acai or prices fall, you have the carbon market to hold the project. Of course, it's very, very important, again, that the project has financial additionality, that is clear that the carbon price is necessary for the project to occur, which in forestry projects, since there's a lot of initial capital needed to develop these projects in the start, it's usually the case. So yes, it affects, and the way is to have different sources of income.
Diversification, yeah.
Exactly.
Thanks, Ricardo. That's interesting. And I was wondering, just a follow-up question, a little bit of my side. I know, Kirti, sometimes projects are updated, the rating of project is updated, right? And this may affect a bit the price and this shift. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the updating process and why would it happen?
Yeah, so all of BeZero's ratings are live and dynamic. This means that they're not static, and that's because these projects are living, breathing projects too. They're not static. So there's a lot of reasons for why we would review a project. Broadly speaking, it could be an internal review or an external review. External reviews are driven by changes to a project. So for instance, like imagine, you know, a loss event, like infringement, encroachment around the project area. And, you know, examples that I can think of were actually quicker to observe these changes to a project than, you know, the standards body that's like in charge of the project as well. So that's a very quick signal. So those are the reasons that a project could be reviewed. What we do is we have like a very strong process for how a review is carried out. We alert the market that a review is taking place if we expect it to have material impacts on the headline letter rating. And to do that, we'll put the project on watch, and we're seeing, you know, other agencies also pick up this practice of putting projects on watch. It's the first alert to the market that this is being studied. It'll also provide you with a reason for why it's being studied and why it's under review. And then at the end of our review cycle, projects can either be upgraded, downgraded, or reaffirmed, and the review will be concluded. And we'll always make a public announcement as well of those when that happens.
Thanks, Kirti. Another question on technologies. We've touched upon before remote sensing, geospatial, drones. What emerging technologies or innovations are helping to improve credit integrity, and what future developments should we look out for? Volunteers to this question.
Well, I can start and you guys can jump in as much as you want. So yeah, first of all, of course, again, the satellite and remote sensing technology has improved. We have for a few years now, for example, the JEDI satellite, which is kind of a LiDAR, which means basically a laser that scans forests, and you can use that to model forest structure in a large scale. So something was almost science fiction 20 years ago, right? So we have that today. Of course, coming closer, we have now different, not only better hardware, you know, better tools and satellites and drones, but also better platforms and softwares that process that in data. Like we have deforestation models powered by AI nowadays. You know, another thing, science fiction 20 years ago. So these kind of technologies are really, really helping, and I also see that this is being greatly incorporated by rating agencies, is greatly incorporated by standards as well. With the standards, they are giving different and also names to their to the carbon credit, if it's removal or reduction, you know. And well, I think this kind of stuff, but also the new technologies as well for the carbon market. It's an interesting dynamic, the carbon market, because, for example, some clean energy projects, they may be no longer additional because the technology becomes cheaper to implement them. So it's a very complex relationship on that sense.
Even past removal credits, you also saw the same thing on reduction. There were some scrutiny on some cookstove projects, and now you've seen the appearance of a new metered cookstove methodology that people can make use of to reaffirm the baseline, to reaffirm the emission reductions that they're achieving. So you see it across all different methodologies, and I think it's great.
Just to add a little bit also on the monitoring, like now going for the co-benefits like fauna, we have recorders, voice recorders and camera recorders that monitor fauna. We had that for more than 10 years. Now with AI, you can identify the species that is being filmed or recorded automatically. So this opens the doors for large-scale monitoring on that. So it's really interesting to see.
Yeah, we're getting incredible shots of animals in the forest, right? Quite amazing. I love them. Kirti, are these technologies and innovations captured in the ratings?
Yeah, they're definitely captured in our rating assessments, and we're seeing some of these newer methodologies, like the one you referenced on cook stoves, get like a different rating than like methodologies past and previous. I think I also just wouldn't underestimate like the upskilling of people. Like the thing that we talk about a lot is like the best models inferred by the best analysts, and like for the first time, at BeZero, we've got a really huge analytical team, and they're all trained to interpret and work on these models, to develop them further, and I think that's also a really exciting space to be around.
For sure, it's a learning process for the buyers, but also for the developers and for the ratings, right? And as we sophisticate, I'm sure integrity will be increased. Ricardo?
Absolutely, and you said people, and not only people but also the local stakeholders. Again, there are apps that you can measure the tree diameter and height with your cell phone, apps that identify species on the ground, and then we have also projects, community-based projects that do the monitoring based on the local people do the monitoring and report on the carbon in their farm. So it's quite amazing.
The engagement with the community,
yes.
and the innovation is actually not only technologically, but also people, again. No, interesting. And as we speak about a little bit this science, sci-fi, as you said, or emerging things, I want to take a little bit the last question and have a bit of a one-liner from all of you, just to close off. We're 5 minutes to the end. So looking forward, what future trends do you foresee having the biggest impact on the VCM? And how can stakeholders ensure that both quality and transparency remain at the forefront of these developments?
I don't know if I can make a one-liner to answer this, but I think one of the biggest trends that's going to have the largest impact on the voluntary carbon market is going to be new legislations coming up, new regulations coming up around the purchasing of these carbon credits, like you're seeing now for the aviation industry around CORSIA. Having more of these regulations put in place will only motivate the market and will only, educate buyers towards the right choice. So it's really a common effort of developers, buyers, and regulators alike that need to work together to make sure that we can achieve the potential of the carbon market.
Yeah, I fully agree. And for me, like constructive criticism to the voluntary carbon markets is welcome. And of course, it's a building is adaptive management, so it's welcome and should be incorporated because we need that to improve the projects. But we also need the voluntary carbon markets. Of course, it's a front to face the climate crisis. We have many other activities beyond that. But we need it, and criticism is welcome. And I think improvement should always be continuous. We should also learn as we go. And we learned a lot in these last years, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. I very much resonate with Ricardo. I think it's just being accepting. The trend should be accepting of changes. There's no silver bullet to get us to the climate targets that we need to meet, and the voluntary carbon market is only one mechanism to get there. So it's about really how we make this mechanism an effective one. I also think there's been like a lot of work recently on methodology development and improvement. But I think an understanding that that's like not the end point, that this will be continuous as we constantly like raise the bar for quality.
Yeah, agreed.
Thank you. I can only agree with all that's just been said. And for me, really, there's a lot of takeaways. And one of the key ones for me is really try to understand what these projects are, look out for the factors that make them high quality and high integrity, leverage sources as standards and as rating to really understand. But also it's a little bit those price points, right? Be ready to be sure that you can pay for the quality, and that's what it's needed also from the buyer side, in my opinion. Yep. But so thank you very much, all of you, for all of the audience for joining us, and for the panel for this interesting conversation. And yeah, let's curious to see how the VCM develops to become of higher integrity.
Thank you very much, Benedetta.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.